Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to be going over something a little bit different than what I've done in the past. This is actually something I've kind of been working on for a few months now. So this is going to be going over medium blaster kiting, which I'm sure a lot of people have questions on or are confused about, since blasters are, mostly known for being a close-range weapon system. The idea kind of came about from a long time ago. There was I believe it was a Garmin video that had the Adrestia, which was the AT Deimos essentially, or an AT ship that was using the Deimos hull. But it had a fall-off bonus and a scram range bonus, well, scram point bonus. Basically, it was kind of like a combination of a Proteus and a Deimos, and it was really fast and projected decently, at least back then. And the video basically involved him, fighting a big group with it and killing things with blasters all the way out to like 30, 40, 50 kilometers. So mainly this video is trying to replicate that, but I also wanted to kind of showcase, what you can actually do with blasters in the current meta. And, they're not quite as short range as people think. It's just you need to utilize the bonuses that are given. Now, I will say there's... for one thing to point out right away here in this video is that this isn't necessarily the fights that I would like to showcase, but due to kind of how sparse it is roaming right now, these are kind of the best I could get. Like, I've been working on this video for a few months now. I was really hoping I could get like one or two more, quote-unquote good fights, but they're just not really coming right now, so I figured I'm just going to go ahead and make the video with what I've got. Now, as far as blaster kiting itself goes, the issue isn't really... I wouldn't say it's an issue with the blasters themselves. I think the blasters themselves are good for actually kiting. The issue is more along with the ships themselves. So, again, if you were able to isolate the blasters by themselves, put them on a hull that worked well, blaster kiting, I think, would be perfectly viable. But again, the issue is not the blasters themselves, it's the ships that you need to put them on that end up making the whole situation weak. So let's talk about the blasters themselves, or some of their potential weaknesses. So the original idea of this came about, again, from the Adrestia video, but also I wanted to see how they'd compare to medium autocannons. Medium autocannons are one of those things that I think they're a lot weaker than they really should be, and it typically takes really big bonuses to actually make them work. For example, like the Sleipnir, where you get basically a 100% damage bonus to them along with the fall-off bonus. Plus the ship itself is actually really good. Or even just like the standard T1 Hurricane, where you're getting double damage bonuses plus 6 guns. That also works pretty well with autocannons. So I wanted to compare how it felt flying, like an autocannon ship with blaster kiting, and see, what's the main difference. Does blasters actually feel comparable to autocannons? Do they not? Is there another issue there? So the main differences between the two is that you're going to have a little bit less max projection with blaster kiting with autocannons, which is kind of obvious because autocannons are balanced around being a pretty much primarily fighting only in fall off. But with that being said, the main difference, or the difference is at like 40 or 50 kilometers between medium ACs with barrage and blasters with null is like maybe 80 DPS. So it's not super significant, mainly because barrage is starting at a much lower DPS than the null is with blasters. The other weaknesses are you don't have any selectable damage, so that is kind of nice about autocannons to some extent. Now, people like to throw around the selectable damage thing with autocannons. It's kind of true, kind of not true, because if you actually want to project properly with autocannons, you need to use barrage, and then you're stuck in kinetic explosive lock. So, again, you're not technically utilizing a selectable damage there. But again, if you are fighting within that mid-range area, you can swap to EMP, phase plasma, and fusion. And then the main benefit for autocannons is obviously no cap requirements compared to blaster kiting, where you still need to have cap to shoot your guns. So, again, kiting with blasters feels relatively decent, but it's more of an issue with the holes themselves rather than the weapon system. So what is it that you actually need out of a ship hull to make blaster kiting work? Well, the main thing really is just the fall-off bonus. So like, for example, here with the Deimos, you get 10% or 50% bonus to fall off at level 5, double damage bonuses, which is nice. And, so that's the primary thing. Think of it more like, a Vagabond, or, again, the Sleipnir, where they also have a 50% bonus to fall off. So that's what you're needing to build your foundation upon. So the ships that can do this are the Proteus, the Deimos, the Astarte, the Vigilant, the Ferox, and potentially, now with the new battlecruisers coming out, the Ferox Navy issue. So again, we have the Deimos here, we got the fall-off bonus, and every ship kind of has its own bonuses to blaster kiting. They have their pros and cons. And so kind of going to go through each of the ships real quick here. Not going to spend too much time on this because they're all fairly similar, but I'm going to go over each of the pros and cons of each, just to kind of go through them, because I'm not going to showcase every single one of them in this video. This video is primarily going to be the Proteus, and I'm going to have probably one fight with the Deimos. The Deimos is probably the best one for like actually learning, because it's cheap. You get T2 resistances, you get the ADCU, so it's just easier to actually experiment with compared to the Proteus. But once you get more comfortable flying it and figure out the ranges and how it feels, then I think it's a good time to step up to the Proteus, because you just get a lot more for this specific task. So again, Proteus the Deimos is faster than the Proteus, has ADCU, and again is cheaper. Its cons are that it lacks the long scram and the tracking bonus. And then the other thing we're going to talk about here is the reputation of these ships. So again, going back to saying that blaster kiting is viable, but you feel let down by the ships, almost every ship that can do blaster kiting well has a bad reputation associated with it, at least when you're trying to solo. So for the Deimos, the reputation is that everyone assumes you're going to tank the world, and they're immediately going to resort to blobs because they don't want to deal with, they're not going to try to solo a Deimos, unless if they're just significantly outclassing you in most cases. So again, that's kind of the thing you just have to be aware of. With the Proteus, to put it simply, a lot of its bonuses synergize really well with blaster kiting, because you get the long scram, you have a utility high for a neut, you have the tracking bonus, and as kind of a minor bonus, the hyperspatial subsystem makes roaming in it feel good, because you're warping at 6 AU a second, so you kind of feel like you're just running around in a frigate. Plus its agility is really good as well, which also makes it really hard to hold down. Now the next one is going to be the Astarte. The pros are it's faster than the Proteus. It has self-links. You can kind of do a poor man's long scram with it by using interdiction links. And it has more DPS than the other options, because you get that rate of fire bonus plus a damage bonus. The cons are it's less agile, and you really feel this when you're on a gate trying to align or warp off somewhere. It just feels like a giant turd. Struggles to tank similarly as the Proteus in this particular arrangement, because you're only using a single medium ancillary, which I'll talk about this more when I actually go over this fit for the Proteus. And then for the reputation, kind of the same as the Deimos, but apparently, at least in my experience, is a lot worse. I lost like 5 Astartes trying to get good fights, and I got 0 worthwhile fights because they all died to just massive blobs that just appeared out of nowhere. So, potentially bad luck on that one, but I was really getting tired of feeding Astartes. Then the next one's the Vigilant. So pros, it's faster than the other options, has a really good web for defense, and then the cons, it's made out of a paper bag and struggles with fitting a bit. Then the reputation is people will fear the web and will bring more than you can tank. The Ferox is pros are it's very cheap. It's a nice blend of optimal and fall off bonuses. The cons, this thing is so slow, so it's not really viable with the speed, but you might be able to pull off some tricks and baiting with it to make it work. Honorable mentions are the Ferox Navy issue. Again, it just came out, not a whole lot of testing on it yet, and the Brutix Navy issue. So the pros of those two ships is you have some overlapping bonuses with Proteus, like the tracking bonus. You get decent speed, and you can self-link. The cons are less maximum engagement range for blasters since you're not getting the full 50% damage bonus, or I'm sorry, the full 50% fall-off bonus. And as far as reputations go, for the BNI, everyone's going to assume that you're just the 150,000 EHP hull tank, which means the response will likely be overboard. The Ferox Navy issue is currently unknown, but might be viable with a lot more mids to work with. Alright, so with that all out of the way now, I'll go over this Proteus fit. So this Proteus is fit, again, for blaster kiting, and it's relatively light on tank just because it kind of needs to be, but there are some things you can do to improve this. I'm using my cheap fit here, I guess you could say. This is what I did basically all my testing on, but if you wanted to make this maybe a little bit, or probably quite a bit better, to be honest, I think you really need to change this medium ancillary to an A-type rep, just so you can actually have some sustain and tank longer to stay on grid to fight other things. I think that was the biggest issue I had with the Proteus, is that you tanked really well until your medium ancillary ran out. And at that point, it was almost always a case where I could have caught something else on grid and killed them, but I just did not have the reps to do it. So with an A-type, you would be able to then have a little bit more sustainability, and then you could, fight more things on grid instead of just kind of like assassinating one or two things and then having to run away. Now, the only disadvantage of the A-type, other than cost, is that you would need to drop the medium neut. So you would most likely need to change this to a small neut or just drop it all together, unless if you're using like Genos or something like that. And that's kind of the other thing I wanted to talk about, is that the Proteus, again, it's slow. This fit goes 1,465 meters a second. Cold, and then you go 2K heated, and so when you're heating it, it's not too bad, it's workable, along with the long scram, because when you heat the scram you get a 21 kilometer optimal, which is really good. It's a really good defensive option, but again, it's for the current meta, this is slow. And it kind of shows when you're just actually utilizing it. Again, this goes back to what I was talking about with blaster kiting. You're not let down by the weapon system, you're let down by the ships. But the Proteus, I think, has kind of the best blend of everything to make it work. And so the main thing I want to talk about here is that this fit, I think, would benefit a lot if you had like high-grade snakes, because I think that would get your base speed up to around 1,800, maybe 1,900 meters a second. And I also fly this fit with Synth Exile, Synth Soothsayer, and then an Overclock, just to get that speed up a little bit, get a little bit more fall off, and then get a little bit more repping power. So, again, if you were using high grades, that would be also, be workable. You could even, if you had an A-type rep and you use the Asclepians, that might also be good, just so you have more sustain. Because, the issue is that you're going to run into more than one rapid light ship at a time. So if you could actually tank one or two of them relatively decently, that gives you better sustain, and it might be worth not having the speed to, be quite as fast, but at least be able to tank things. But going back to the fit here, now that we talked about that, I fit this very similar to how you would fit like kiting with autocannons. The only difference is with kiting with autocannons, you're normally shield fit, so you don't have the tracking computer use like double tracking enhancers, but you still use normal double ambient extensions for autocannon kiting. So we have that here, and then you have the tracking computer with an optimal range script, which gets your fall off to about 25 kilometers. You know, on an in-game it shows 30 because it calculates your optimal plus your fall off. But you know, when you graph it out and look at it, you still project, I think it's 250 to 270 out to like 35 kilometers, which is fine. You're mainly wanting that range, so if there's an interceptor or frigate pointing you, you can still hit it, which is a problem with a lot of blaster ships on their own, is that they just cannot hit things past 15-20 kilometers even using null, just because of that short range. So you can still push off things that are tackling you, and you know, that way you feel a little bit more like you actually have options to get away from things. We have the, you know, again, I talked about this a little bit already, but in this case I'll point out specifically, we're using a domination warp scram. It's really not worth it using a lower tier scram. I tried being kind of cheap about it in the beginning using a Cal Navy scram, but you really just need that extra range to stay alive. You have a cat booster, obvious. You got to use the compact micro warp drive to get this to fit. Double mag stab using the Imperial Navy membrane, just get a little bit more tank. Damage control, medium AR. Corpus C type for CPU, and again, just to get a little bit extra explosive resistance. Then you got a polycarb for the rig to get your speed up just a little bit, because the base speed without any mods is like 1350 or something. It's abysmal on the Proteus, so that at least gets you up a little bit higher. And then with null, you are doing 622 DPS. Actually, that is probably including drones. So with null, you're doing 537 DPS, and then if you include your drones, you know, 622, which is, again, if we're comparing this to autocannon fits, that's a lot higher than like a barrage Vagabond, or even short range ammo Vagabond like EMP, fusion, plasma. I think those are all around 550 for the short range, and then with barrage you're 370 to 400 if you're including drones, possibly 450 with drones actually. So you know, you're kind of starting on a much higher baseline with blaster kiting. It's just your maximum potential range is a little bit lower, but when you pair it with this scram, it works really, really well on the Proteus. In this first fight with a Proteus, I was roaming through Fraternity Space and ran across a camp that they had. Originally it was like a scimitar and this Gnosis, and I think it was like a Caracal or Cerberus or something, but they warped off and reshipped. I actually skipped about 2 or 3 minutes of this video. They kind of kept reshipping back and forth, like they had a Vigilant that they warped down and then left. So in the meantime, I was just kind of shooting this whole tank Proteus, and I was just keeping them at you know, 15-16 kilometers. So they warped the Slasher down here, and I burn off because I don't want to get hard tackled by the Slasher, but he actually doesn't really commit, and he just warps off. And during this time, he reshipped again into a Vagabond. So again, I'm kind of pulling a little bit of range just to get away from the Gnosis, because I just don't want them to sit on top of me. And then they start burning into the Vagabond here. Anyone who's flown a Vagabond kind of knows that you can choose between brawling and kiting with it, which is kind of the same thing I'm doing with this Proteus here. I realize, or I see that the Vagabond here is long point fit, so he's not one of the ramming Vagabonds. So I scram him at range just to kind of keep his DPS down, so he can't get on top of me. And as you can see, you know, I'm able to still apply decently. He jams me with EC drones, because of course. And then at this point, I just relock the Vagabond instead of trying to kill the drones, but I do pre-lock the drones, and then the Slasher warps back in. So now the Slasher is actually committing and trying to burn in a little bit, and you can kind of see here that, you know, even at 20-21 kilometers, I'm able to apply really well. I scram them at range and just kind of delete them real quick. And then from here I notice, you know, the Gnosis is kind of warped off, and the Vagabond's still trying to ram me. And from here I decide that I need to go ahead and commit, and, you know, I can do more damage than him and just load void and keep at range, so that I can do around 1000 DPS. With this fit, yeah, you do about 1000 DPS with Void, so it's really flexible because you can go from doing 600 plus DPS at range to 1000 DPS up close if you need it. So in that regard, it's a lot better than typically brawling or doing the hybrid skirmishing role with like a Vagabond or a Loki or Sleipnir or things like that, because you just have a lot more DPS on tap that you can swap between. And as you see, I'm kind of melting through this Vagabond, and then the Gnosis lands, so I start burning away from it, so that way I'm not getting hard tackled by the Gnosis. He only gets a web on me, and then I was able to kill the Vagabond right there at the end. Now this is kind of what I was talking about with the rep, is that you can see my AAR is out of charges, and honestly I could have held him here, but I was a little unsure on it, and they could have just reshipped and I wouldn't have had any way to tank, so I go ahead and warp off. In this next fight I run across an initiative Vedmak, and there's actually several people jumping through their Ansiblex in this system, or just jumping in the system. So I was burning away to try and distance myself from everything coming in, and this Vedmak started chasing me. This is actually 100 min Vedmak, so I didn't realize it at the time, but it was actually 100 min fit. So I'm mainly just pulling range here because they have a second Vedmak that lands, and I'm still able to apply decently to this Vedmak as I'm burning away. And I noticed that the other Vedmak's a little bit of a distance away, so I'm not too... I realize I might have a little bit of time to burn in here and actually just finish this Vedmak off, because again, I've already got him at half armor and I'm kind of at my end of my fall off. So I decided to go ahead and kind of turn around here and see if I can nuke this Vedmak real quick before everything else starts landing, because as you can see, they have a Loki that's landed now, but again, the Loki's about 100 kilometers off, so I figure hey, I might have some time here to go in and kill this Vedmak real quick. So as you can see, I'm able to hold him down and apply my damage at range, staying out of any range of maybe neuts he has, and then another Loki and a Nestor and a bunch of other stuff starts to land. So at this point I figure I'll just go ahead and warp off before I get held down. For this fight I run across a Proteus that was kind of sitting in a bubble camp or a drag bubble, but I warped in from the opposite end, so all I saw was just a Proteus sitting there. So I go ahead and just warp directly to the bubble before he can warp off, and land a scram on him. And he's a blaster fit Proteus, so he really doesn't have any projection, and this is kind of one of the nice things about the scram kiting Proteus. When you're dealing with another brawler, especially like a battle cruiser or in this case the Gnosis, that are almost always fit with this whole tank fit, that's just blasters and whole tank, you can pretty much negate all of their damage, and they can't apply anything to you, and you can also stay out of their tackle. So you don't have to commit to brawling them, especially because normally these whole tank Gnosises are just meant to hold you down so the blob can come in. So I was kind of thinking, okay, it's kind of weird seeing this Proteus sitting in a bubble, and maybe someone's going to come in once he's tackled, and there'll be more of a fight. I do make a mistake here because I'm just holding at 15 kilometers when I really need to be orbiting, because now his drones start applying, and I wasn't really considering them to be all that high in DPS, but the Proteus tank isn't super great with how it's fit, just again because it was focusing on trying to project damage. So at this point I realized that I need to stop being dumb and actually start orbiting, and then I just go ahead and focus down his drones. And this is, again, kind of another nice thing, is that now that you do have that range with your blasters, you can project really well to kill drones. And they don't need to be on top of you to do it. So, again, at this point, I go ahead and just defang them. And, once I defang them, then I go ahead and put my DPS back on the Gnosis. And the other nice thing with the Proteus is that you can just keep your scram heated almost, indefinitely. Like this whole fight, I had the scram heated. I was debating on turning off heat, but this is one of my earlier fights, and I couldn't remember exactly what my cold range was. I think it's 15 kilometers cold with this scram, because I think this is an abyssal scram, and so I might have lost him here, so I just decided just to keep it heated. And now that I've defanged him, I'm able just to pretty easily pick him off here and not have to deal with you know, any incoming damage. He does hit me a little bit with null, but again, it's very minor damage. I'm able to tank it just fine. So I end up running across yet again another Vedmak. So this Vedmak, this was I think it was a triple medium neut Vedmak. So he was actually still kind of a problem, and I do make a mistake because I don't orbit far enough to stay completely out of range of the neuts. And actually, he ends up bringing in a Rodiva shortly, right before he dies. But unfortunately, I couldn't tackle the Rodiva because I was, well, you're in a Proteus, so you're kind of slow to react and slow speed. But you know, again, I'm staying out of range of those triple neuts, because if you were in a standard Proteus and you're trying to brawl him, you'd have been taking the full brunt of those neuts. So I'm able just to orbit at range here and apply damage. And you know, again, stay outside of. He's not exactly getting full hits on me either. He's getting kind of grazing shots, and we're able to handle him. And you know, the neuts are still putting pressure on me. So again, that's my mistake. I should have been a little bit further out. And but right there at the end, my guns cap out, but my scram's still holding. So I just have to inject right at the end to get my guns to cycle one more time and finish them off. And as you can see here, that's when the Rodiva lands. And, you know, I am a little bit slow to react here. But I do try and burn in and grab him, but he warps out right at the last second, right before he's in range of my scram. I'm including this fight just because it's interesting in the mentality of people that see a Proteus, or at least that want to engage it, because again, very rarely does someone see a Proteus that's going to be, you know, kiting. You know, obviously there's a rail fit that exists, but in this case, you know, if they see you and they see neutron blasters on you, they just assume that, you know, you're a brawler fit. So that does kind of give you the element of surprise. So in this case, we have two Hecates burning in on me. And, you know, if two Hecates get on top of you, it definitely could be potentially a problem, especially in this fit. So I kind of bait them in. I don't want to scram them immediately at 21 kilometers because they might end up, the second one might end up trying to burn away. So I take care of the first Hecate pretty quickly, and then I burn back in on the second Hecate. So, you know, again, this isn't really a hard fight. It's more just showcasing that you can kind of utilize that perception that all Proteuses are brawly Proteuses, or every Proteus with neutron blasters is brawly. And use that to your advantage to you know, get a fight or secure some kills pretty easily. This is another fight that's not very, and this isn't really a fight, but again, this video isn't really to showcase super awesome fights. It's more just to showcase the theory or the application of this. So in this fit, there's a slasher here that's trying to tackle me for, I think, Brave. And I just wanted to showcase really that, you know, look, this thing died at 42 kilometers with medium blasters. So you are able to project with this. They do work. You know, there's just not a lot of fights I was able to get against small tackle. So I'm just including this again to show that, you know, yes, you can project out to 40 plus kilometers with medium blasters. So this is another similar fight. Again, this isn't some exciting, crazy, awesome fight. It's just kind of showcasing the, you know, potential of kiting with blasters. This is actually my very first fight with this fit, and as you can tell, I forget to turn on my tracking computer to try and shoot this malediction, but I'm still able to land some shots on him at the end. But a Jaguar warps in, so my focus immediately switches from the malediction to the Jaguar. And I'm able to scram him right before he tackles me. And, you know, then I start applying to him. As you can see, I got one shot in on the malediction that put him in half armor, so he ended up warping off while the Jag tries to hold point. After I drop scram, he ends up burning off. Now, this is my older fit with the Cal Navy scram. As you can see, you know, you get 18 kilometers range and then they can start burning away. But, you know, again, I was able to pop this Jag right at 29 kilometers or 30 kilometers. And at this point, they warp in a Scimitar and a Cerberus, as well as the malediction comes back. I was thinking about staying and fighting because it's, you know, reasonable. I could just go all in on that scimitar. But this is slice base, and that's not the only things they're going to bring. And I really don't want to be, you know, hard tackled by a malediction while trying to kill a scimitar. So I go ahead and warp off. And the last fight with the Proteus is against, yet again, another Vedmak. It seems like all I was fighting with this was Vedmaks. This one is a little bit different because he's a dual rep fit, and in the beginning here I make a mistake because I'm fumbling with taking my drugs because it kind of glitched out on me, and I selected all three of them and then it off clicked and I had to select them all individually, so I was kind of like distracted half of this fight, but I was still able to apply decently while I was distracted. And with Vedmaks, you know, they're not too bad as long as you heat the armor hardener and then you heat the rep. You can kind of just tank them long enough to punch through. And, you know, again, with the Knoll, you're doing 600 DPS, so you're able to kind of punch through them, even at that range and with that damage. In this case, so the second Vedmak warps in because Vedmaks normally always come in too. So at this point, because he's taking a little bit longer than I prefer to kill, I go ahead and swap to Void, kind of like how I did with the Vagabond. And, you know, again, the nice thing here is you can do that. You can just transition immediately from kiting to brawling, and you can just punch right through these active tanks like this. So once I'm able to track, you know, I basically just two-shot him and he goes down. And again, this showcases why you really need the A-type armor rep on this fit. I've got, I think, 3 reps left right now, and I was really trying to decide on if I should go on this Vedmak or not. I think I really should have. I think I should have just straight, you know, rammed him with Void and just tried to burn him down real quick. Especially because, you know, the Vedmak kind of has low starting DPS, but I, you know, make the wrong decision here to kite him a little bit, so that allows him to, well, he doesn't spool up here. I think he shoots me right at the very beginning, but I decided that I'll just go ahead and warp off because I wasn't confident in the reps I had left. And this is the Deimos fit. This is really bare bones and basic. Again, the point of this Deimos fit is to be cheap and just to kind of test. So this was the initial testing platform. I did make some changes to this later on, specifically just removing the nanofiber and adding an energized adaptive membrane, just because the tank was really lacking, specifically your EMP resistance. You know, well, I mean, granted, your explosive resistance isn't that good either. But, you know, again, the speed without the nano is workable, especially compared to the Proteus. And your main point here isn't necessarily to outrun everything. It's just to, again, kind of, you're skirmishing with this. You're really trying to stay on that edge and trying to avoid things. You're kind of dancing around that 20 to 30 kilometer mark and then diving in when you need to actually commit and hold them. And I'll show you what that looks like in the fight with the Deimos that I show. So, you know, again, T2 Scram, Cat Booster, MWD, Tracking Computer, kind of the same layout you have on the Proteus, just without the long Scram. And again, in this case, you can either go with a nano, you can go with adaptive nanomembrane. It's just, I think the adaptive nanomembrane's better here because you really do need that extra tank. And then you do double ambient extension rigs for the maximum range. This fits. I was actually messing around with this and I had web drones in it. Don't put web drones in it. Just include 2 light drones. Web drones kind of suck. And also it lets you get soloed by a claw because you can't track anything. So if you have normal light drones and you can kind of clear off tackle, that gets under your guns. Other than that, you know, there's not really a whole lot to say about it. It's very similar to the Proteus as far as DPS goes. You get the same kind of double set of lights if you go for light drones instead of using web drones. And then it's just faster and less likely to be caught as easily. So yeah, you know, the Deimos works for testing, but beyond that, you know, not having that long scram, it really feels lacking in that regard. And again, people see a Deimos, they're not going to assume that you're a really squishy fit. They're going to assume that you're the, you know, standard dual rep tanky fit, and they're just going to kind of swarm you with, again, what they expect to see from a Deimos. So it's normally kind of hard to find a decent fight with the Deimos. In the only fight with the Deimos, I go against a Vagabond, Incursus, and this Crow. I already killed the Incursus, but I didn't fully record it, so I didn't include it. But as you can see with this Crow, I was able to hit him at range and forced him off pretty quickly. So now the Vagabond's coming in. I noticed when the Vagabond first started accelerating, he wasn't going his max speed, he's going like 1100 meters a second, which made me think that he's a dual prop fit. So he's Afterburner Micro Warp Drive. So I was making sure that I was trying to stay out of his range. And in the rare event, the web drones actually kind of help keep him just outside of my range. But so you can kind of see that I'm applying decently. And this is an XLASB fit, so he's Afterburner Micro Warp Drive Scram XLASB. So my goal here is just to try to make him waste those charges. So I'm doing what I can to stay out of his range. I'm heating my Micro Warp Drive. There's still about 1,000 meters second difference, so I'm kind of trying to change my positioning right as he gets close. Then I am able to actually land some defensive scrams, and he doesn't scram me back right away. It actually kind of looks like he was putting his nos on me first rather than his scram. So that's probably why I was able to survive this a little bit. But I'm again just continually trying to kind of plink away at that XLASB, and so then I can dive into commit fully. But in this case, he actually ends up burning off before I could commit, because I think he's actually going to reload his XLASB. And I do make a mistake because I let my rep run, I think, 2 reps when I was not repping anything. So I could have reloaded here, but I decided against it. And I go ahead and speed up the video here because all I'm doing is just kind of chasing him down while he reloads his rep. So I don't want to extend this any further than it needs to be, but I also didn't really want to do a cut. And I do a couple kind of practice shots around 50 kilometers, see if I could actually hit him at all. You can see he's trying to shoot me, but he can't hit me at all. So I just kind of send a few shots just to see what kind of range I get. And I am actually able to hit him just barely at like 50 kilometers, but he can't hit me. So it's kind of funny seeing a Vagabond not hit something at 50 kilometers, but the Blaster Deimos can. So now it looks like he's burning back in again. He's ready to try again. And so now I'm just trying to keep my distance from him to prevent that scram, and again try and whittle him down to the point where he doesn't have charges left, or he's only got 1 or 2 charges left. So that's what I'm doing now. And he starts getting close again, and the web drones are, I think the web drones are like bleeding a few 100 meters a second off of him, which is just enough for me to just kind of play, I'm not touching you. You see here I'm able to get another defensive scram on him. He puts his nos on me, and then I just burn right back out of range. I'm not really doing a whole lot of heat with my guns, and I decide now is probably a good time to do that. And around from here, he starts to, or here soon, he starts to bleed into armor a little bit. So that's kind of my clue that I need to go ahead and dive in and just fully commit. And the nice thing about the Deimos is you do have the ADCU, so I actually make good use of it here with my last 1 or 2 reps. I go ahead and activate it as I burn back in to commit, and then I go ahead and swap to Void. This is kind of dangerous because he's Afterburner fit, but I see he's burning kind of right at me, so I'm like, alright, well I got enough time I think to where I can just give him a few shots with Void to kill him before he gets under my guns. And I was able to kill him right here, and I think he actually had just ran out of XLASB charges. And then right at this time, then the Crow lands in here, and he tackles me, but he doesn't have any weapons or anything like that, and we're like 300 kilometers off the ESS, so I don't have to worry about anything coming in to get me. So I go ahead and just tackle him back. I didn't realize that this was a dual prop Crow, so he was Afterburner and Micro Warp Drive fit. So it takes me a moment to actually realize that, I need to set my ranges a little bit further away. I do swap to the tracking script on my tracking computer just to get that extra range, and I swap to Cal Navy to, again, get more tracking. And get a couple hits here and there, and again, I'm not realizing he's actually afterburner fit, so I ended up, I think, getting too close to him again, and he just kind of burns away from me. So once I realize, hey, I need to actually pull range and stay there, then I get my tracking up again and finish him off. I had a few more fights with the Deimos, but they weren't really anything all that exciting, killing tackle here and there. This is the best fight I figured, and I wasn't gonna spend more time on fights that the Proteus probably shows off better. So that's going to be it for this video. Hope it covered most of your questions. I know there's a lot of information there. The key takeaways here is that blaster kiting as a potential option, I think, is viable as far as the weapon system goes. But you're always fighting around it, how viable it is because of the ships that it goes on. And, it's interesting because you have multiple ships that have armor rep bonuses like the Astarte, the Proteus, the Deimos, but you still end up struggling to tank. And I think there could be some potential changes here, especially with how I was flying it. A lot of my damage was happening, within scram range or 20 kilometers. So I'm kind of thinking maybe you could drop a ambient rig to lower your potential max range, but maybe add in a nano pump to get a little bit more tank in, which would be useful if you're switching to like an A-type, since A-type tanks slightly less than the medium ancillary, and then the nano pump would kind of get the damage back up. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about this, and going back to the ships themselves kind of letting you down, is that this could be a niche that could be explored a little bit more as far as like ship balance goes. One of the main things I always see an issue with Gallente ships is that they always kind of fall into the same category. You have the close range blaster brawler, like the Thorax, the Deimos, the Brutix, etc. And then you have the drone ship, so you have like the Vexor, the Ishtar, the Dominix, things like that. And every time I'm thinking of Gallente and being like, well, what are they actually missing? Doing this and testing this out kind of made me think, well, maybe we could incorporate a ship that is well balanced around blaster kiting, and not necessarily something that's super scary and super tanky. So just as an example, you could look at like an Executor Navy issue and maybe change the bonuses on it to where you'd have, instead of a 50% fall off bonus, you could go with like 75% fall off bonus or 100% fall off bonus. Then just keep the targeting range low, so you couldn't abuse it as much with rails, but you would have a fast platform for blaster kiting to be able to project with and give you some variety for anti-tackle. But again, it's not really necessary. It's just kind of a thought I had. But again, this was a pretty fun experiment. I just wish I could have gotten some better fights with it. But it is what it is, just due to how the meta is and how few people are actually out doing things now. But that's pretty much it for this video. So see you in the next one.